Tonight, Niue Police warns over online scammers. Food and beverage outlets frustrated over new withholding tax law. And Niue Star celebrates its 30th anniversary. Good evening, I'm Sarah Mangawa and this is your BCN News. Leading our news tonight, no new cases of COVID-19 were reported yesterday. According to the Niue Public Health Department, the island still remains with 3 active cases. None have recovered. If you are experiencing flu-like symptoms, complete a rapid antigen test. Inform the Public Health Department immediately if your results are positive, and you are to isolate at home for at least 5 days. More information can also be found at covid19.gov.nu. Also on our news for tonight, a 7.0 earthquake struck the south of Fiji at 7:06 a.m. this morning. According to the Niue Disaster Management Office, there was no tsunami threat for Niue. In our series of stories about the government's 2023-2024 budget, with the total expenditure of $53.9 million and $45.1 million in revenue, the $8.7 million deficit budget is now before the Public Accounts Committee before it is presented back to the Whanokepule in 2 weeks for the third and final reading. Here's Esther Pavihi with the breakdown of the budget and which ministries will spend the most and which one will generate the most of the government's financial resources for the new financial year.
The ministry with the most budget support is the Ministry of Social Services with $13 million, accounting for about 24% or just under a quarter of the total expenditure budget. In terms of revenue, the Ministry of Finance will generate the most revenue for the government with $17.5 million, or around 30% of the total revenue the government hopes to generate in the new financial year. Here is the breakdown of the government's budget by ministry or government agency. The central agencies will spend $7.1 million but will generate $118,000 in revenue. The Ministry of Finance will spend $3.2 million and generate $17.5 million in revenue. The Ministry of Social Services will be spending $13 million and generate $635,950. For the Ministry of Natural Resources, $1.6 million they expect to spend and will generate $1.1 million in revenue. The Ministry of Infrastructure will spend $8 million and $3.9 million in revenue. For the commercial and trading arms of government, they will spend $7.1 million and generate $9.1 million in government revenue. The budget is expected back in the Whanokepule for the third and final reading later this month.
There have been a few incidents of scammers on social media pretending to be someone of the community and scamming people for money. The Niue Police Department this week were notified of an online scammer who had reportedly scammed a local member of the community of $30,000. A message to members of the public to beware of online scammers.
According to the Niue Police Department, scammers have notified members of the public that Niue Police and Niue Customs have received a post from a retirement plan in New Hampshire in the United States. People are requested to pay money to have the package cleared from customs and police holds. Chief of Police Tim Wilson told BCN News that $30,000 was scammed from the victim in this incident, which happened online. Niue Police are advising members of the public that if you are notified that you have a package waiting clearance at Customs Niue, you should contact Customs directly to confirm and make any payments directly to them, not to a third party or people online. BCN News is aware that there have also been scammers on Facebook and Instagram pretending to be local members of the community. They have been posting as someone else using the same profile pictures and usernames and surnames and befriending the local community. It is understood that the cybersecurity law has not been reviewed for the past 10 years. But it is clear that cybercrime is becoming an increasing issue with members of the community being scammed for money. Niue Police advise members of the public that if you have been contacted regarding a similar scamming incident, contact them at telephone number 4333. beware of scammers and immediately block and report them before it is too late.
Several small businesses on the island have turned down orders and will not be accepting purchase orders from government departments because of a 10% withhold tax suddenly imposed on these small businesses without prior advice. One of those businesses include Hio Cafe in Tuapa. Its owner, Victoria Posimani Kalauni, spoke to Esther Pavihi about their grievances.
Victoria Pusimani Kalauni, who is also a commissioner of the Public Service Commission and is also the owner of Hio Cafe of Tuapa, told BCN News that they feel hard done by this tax when they are still trying to recover after 3 years of the pandemic and the ever-increasing cost of supplies on the island right now.
So I speak wearing the hat of a business owner right now, and I wasn't aware of it. So come April we had a PO, we were paid that out in full, and come April I couldn't find the invoice paid, so I informed them and they said it had already been paid out, and so I kept looking in my statements for the amount of money, but it wasn't coming up, so again informed them, and then the notice came in to say that for the amount of what it was $265, it's now $238.50 because there's a withholding tax of 10%. And I felt really hard done by. I felt shafted actually, and I looked for information. Maybe Chamber had sent me an email, or there was also no conversations within the small businesses, which is what we do. So I messaged a friend, and she said, yeah, she'd done some work catering for government, and she felt really let down because these are still hard times post-COVID, and we haven't seen profits, even though we look busy. We're recovering from, and so it's really important to be informed of these. And then when you inform Chamber and they're not aware of it, or they are aware of it but they're trying to get more information, then I was told just by another local business person that happened to them too, and that they're withdrawing from doing some work for government. And this is the risk, of doing something like this, of not informing small businesses. You already got kicked through COVID, and now you come out of it thinking, there's the light at the end of the tunnel, and then something like this happens. So yeah, I think really downhearted because we weren't notified.
BCN News reached out to the tax office and the financial secretary earlier this week, but have not yet received any response to our questions. Meanwhile, the Chamber of Commerce CEO Catherine Papani told BCN News that they did raise the concerns of their members with Treasury, to which the Financial Secretary Doreen Siatanga confirmed that the application of the withholding tax is well within the law, but had not been imposed until now. Catherine Papani said that the Chamber of Commerce had requested a formal notification from the Ministry of Finance of this withholding tax and to explain and reference the law, but they have not received a response as yet. For small businesses who depend on the government as the largest consumer of goods and services on the island, times are bleak.
We've doubled what we spend in the stores to be able to come up with a product to be able to sell to consumers that is affordable. But we're in dismal times, and people keep asking me who is the price control board, and here's an example. You buy a fly spray at one shop, which is $15, go to another shop, it's $9.70, and then go to another shop and it's $8.70. And so now oil, cooking oil, it's crazy. Just the other day, the price changed 3 times in 1 week. So first of all, it was $15 for a 2-litre oil, and then it was $23, and then it was $29. It was crazy. Everyone's feeling the pinch. Those who depend fully on business to run, it's back to the drawing board on how we can keep going. But the positive side of this is we go back to our local food, where and whāna's really good at this, where they complement their food with banana and breadfruit and that sort of thing. And I think this is also what tourists would like to do. And I think some want potato chips, but at the end of the day, are you willing to pay for that? And if you look at it, you're actually consuming a much more nutritional product than the actual deep fried fries.
Another local business owner, Willie Saniteli, told BCN News today that he is an NCT registered business, but his invoices to the government are now also being taxed, this additional 10% withholding tax. So for Saniteli, he is being taxed double, he said. And this is a concern for the local business. The Chamber of Commerce is also very concerned with the manner in which the tax was applied without warning. Catherine Papani said that communication is key for businesses on such matters, and when the government talks of strengthening the public-private partnership, then this is not the way to go about it if government agencies are not willing to share information.
The majority of Niueans live in New Zealand, with more than 30,000 Niueans living there, including a small but growing group of academics like Dr. Jess Pasisi and Rennie Atfield Douglas. Dr. Jessica Pasisi from the villages of Mutalo and Hikutavake is a lecturer of Pacific Studies at the University of Otago, and Rennie Atfield Douglas from the villages of Avasele and Hakupu is the Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor for Pacific at the University of Auckland. The two academics are on the island this week to deposit their research reports with Taonga Niue, and today spoke with Esther Pavehi.
Earlier this week at the Taonga Niue Auditorium, Dr. Jessica Pasisi and Rennie Atfield Douglas first presented their research before depositing their reports with Taonga Niue, where their research will contribute to the small but growing collection of research conducted by Niueans and about Niue.
Rennie and I have come up to deposit our theses to Taonga Niue, so it's part of an agreement that I had with Taonga Niue as I completed my PhD thesis, that I would bring it back, and I was fortunate enough to have a hiapo piece by artist Cora Allen Lafaiki Twist to come with my piece, and then the delegation is part of a Health Research New Zealand Council of New Zealand funded project looking at Niue happiness, specifically in the spaces of mental health and well-being.
Dr. Jess Pasisi said that her doctorate thesis was dedicated to her family. Her grandmother, Lela Sialemata, she never met her grandmother, but she was the inspiration for this work.
So even though I had never met her, this PhD became the first place that I got to engage with the legacies that she left behind, right? So in the relationship that I have with my dad and his family, but also in photographs that happened to materialize while I was doing this work.
Rennie Atfield Douglas' thought-provoking research about Niue's decision of self-government and free association with New Zealand was very interesting, covering the period from 1954 to 1974, and is one that is bound to contribute towards the national conversation as we approach the 50th anniversary of this relationship with New Zealand.
Yeah, so what I was looking at was an honours dissertation, so it was quite limited in what I could actually do. But I wanted to look at why Niue chose self-government and free association with New Zealand. And I guess some of the reasoning behind that is we have a large number of Niue people living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I always wondered growing up, how did this come about and why are we as Niue people in the diaspora living here? I also think that in terms of the research that I've done on this topic, as it is really timely in terms of what are the steps moving forward, because we know there's 50 years of the official constitution next year, but what does that mean now for Niue people living here in Niue, but also Niue people living overseas, because there's a large number of us overseas. How do we keep moving forward? And what does that look like? Yeah.
The research itself, the PhD research, was looking at Niue women's perspectives of climate change. So it was a small study of me talking with Whiwhine Niue here about their experiences and perspectives and knowledge about climate change, and more deeply about the Niue environment. And the Hiapo methodology worked as a framework so that I could centre at all times new ways of thinking and being and living here, what that actually means in a research project and what that can look like in a written piece of research.
Both academics, Dr. Jess Pasisi and Rainey Atfield Douglas, shared their passion in encouraging more Niueans towards academic research on Niue, because there is not enough reference literature of Niuean origin for new research. They speak about opportunities for more research led by Niueans and providing the Niue perspective using those opportunities provided for in New Zealand.
Tradition of tangata Niue connecting and engaging and interrogating institutions all across kind of Aotearoa as well as here and beyond this region as well. And I think that having more people in these spaces is an opportunity to actually solidify and then grow kind of what it means to be a tangata Niue in this space. So even though there's only a handful of us in the kind of tertiary spaces, in the tertiary academic spaces at the moment, there is a strong cohort coming through and space for so many more people to come through. I think, you know, with Rennie's questions about kind of sovereignty and self-determination, there are so many questions that tangata Niue from all spaces can actually contribute to that conversation. And there is funding, there is money to support that. So the New Zealand government spends over $40 million in the Pacific doing particular types of research. Hardly any of that is led by Pacific people yet, right? So there's this really great opportunity for us to be at the forefront of what research looks like here.
Yeah, I think also, you know, one of the key things is having Niue research led by Niueans brings a different lens to it, right? And that's no disrespect to those people who have come before us and have done a lot of research for Niue, but I think there is a lot of cultural capital that is untapped. You know, and it's not necessarily just within academia, but just within our own families. You know, histories and stories that have been shared but are no longer being passed on. And so it's really important that, you know, if we are looking at Niue stories, it should also have a Niue perspective, whether it's from someone living in the diaspora like myself and Jess, or it's from someone here living in Niue, because our experiences are very different, but they're not yet recorded, you know, officially or accounted for. And, you know, who better to tell our own stories and advocate for ourselves than us?
The complete interview with Dr. Jessica Pasisi and Rennie Atfield Douglas will be on Radio Sunshine's News of the Week radio program tomorrow from 11 a.m.
The government's team working on the air services agreement with Air New Zealand are still in negotiations with the airliner. Premier Dalton Tagilangi, who is leading the negotiations team, says that they are discussing aircraft capacity, given that in previous months the issue of limiting the amount of pieces on board a flight. Here's more on this story.
On the News of the Week program last week, Premier Dalton Tagilangi confirmed that he is leading the negotiations team, which also includes the Secretary to Government, Peleni Talangi, and Head of External Affairs, Emi Hipa. Premier Tagilangi said that they have spoken about aircraft capacity, given the issues raised by the private sector and passengers alike over the limitations imposed on the number of pieces permitted for each passenger. Last year, Air New Zealand has announced that the second flight to Niue will commence in June, but a few months ago that changed to September. However, last month, BCN News was informed by the Niue Tourism Office that there will no longer be a second flight this year. After conducting further research on Air New Zealand website, BCN News earlier this week discovered that the Air New Zealand flight schedule for Niue will change from a Tuesday flight from Auckland to a Saturday flight on Saturday, the 4th of November. This schedule will remain until May 2024, but there is only one flight per week. BCN News reached out to Air New Zealand with questions about the air services agreement and the second flight, but was told to refer our questions to the Niue government. Premier Tagilangi told BCN News that negotiations are still ongoing, but what is clear is that Air New Zealand is Niue's primary air carrier, but they are still working on the air services agreement.
This month marks the 30th anniversary since the first issue of Niue Star was published on the 11th of June 1993. The family-owned newspaper is the pride of Michael and Halosi Jackson of Hakupu. BCN News spoke via telephone with Niue Star owner Michael Naya Jackson, who yesterday said that he wished to extend his gratitude to their valued customers here in Niue and in New Zealand. Jackson said that he and his family are very proud to have reached this milestone of serving the country for 30 years, providing the only newspaper for the past 30 years. BCN News was able to see the first edition published by the editor Raywin Rex Woods with reporters Dorothy Iuso and Mokatano Puleosi. The typist Joan Beuvale with Lisi Makani as the paper's photographer. The translator was the late Reverend Fellow Pahetongia, and on the computer is Mokatano Puleosi. The front page of the first issue of the Niue Star featured the former premier with the headline Louis for Unity, a story about the celebrations held at the Alofi Tokelau Hall by the village to congratulate Frank Louis for winning the premiership in March that year. The Alofi North Village Council chairperson Richard Heeper led the celebrations to congratulate their Member of Parliament Frank Louis, who won the election for the premiership 11-9 against Member of Parliament for Hakupu Young Vivian. Also in this first issue are pictures of the Queen's Birthday Athletic Sports Special between local village teams and a team of athletes from Auckland. On page 5 told stories about the opening of the pastor's house at Mutaleu, which was officially opened by Mrs. Iris Louis and blessed by then Vice President of the Ekalesia Niue at the time, the late Reverend Josefa Sione Tuato. The article mentioned that the pastor's house cost $80,000. On the same page was another story about the farewell of Pastor Panama Olehake by the village of Lakepa as he and his wife returned to their home village of Tamakotanga after serving Lakepa for 21 years. Pastor Panama Olehake was 83 years old at the time. BCN extend our congratulations to Michael and Losi Jackson and their family and staff former and current on the momentous occasion on the 30th anniversary of the Niue Star. The Hakupu Village Show Day, which took place last Saturday, saw a great number of locals and tourists. There were a variety of food stalls ranging from barbecue to traditional umu food and desserts. An impressive display of agricultural produce, arts and handcrafts of the men and women, as well as a coconut crab show was given. BCN cameras were able to capture the day. The formal part of the program began with the Hakupu village flag raising, followed by the speeches from village council representatives, government officials and diplomats. Here is New Zealand High Commissioner Helen Tana in her speech.
First of all, just been welcome to Hakupu quite a few times in the last year, but in particular I just want to thank the village for the welcome that was provided to Minister Seo, our former Minister for Pacific Peoples, when he came here last Constitution, and the welcome we received from the women and from the village was just fantastic when we opened the new centre. And for us in the office, it's always just forever going to be remembered as the day we met the naughty ladies of Hakupu, which for those of you who are here, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Following the formalities in the morning was the display of the largest coconut crabs. The winning coconut crab of the day went to Denzel and Te Pui Tomailunga, weighing at 2.92 kgs. Followed after was the baby show for infants aged from 1 month to 2 years old. Great performances from the children of Hakupu and the Hakupu women's group Afikaka. The village show day concluded with the men's traditional tasika and the women's Olofo New coconut bowling. A full coverage of the show day will be broadcasted on Television Niue this Saturday at 4 p.m. And that is our news bulletin for tonight. Join us again next week for more. I'm Sarai Mangawa. Good night.